I also want to get into what a mass atrocity is. This is pretty amazing. A mass atrocity is defined as a government intentionally inflicting harsh conditions, pain, distress on civilians for political purposes. That's what a mass atrocity is. Now, they vary in their severity from, death camps to simply just, terrible imprisonment to, arguably the Tiananmen Square, those kinds of things. But a pediatrician who studies this stuff and has actually written about this and visited Cambodia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sri Lanka, and other places all around the world. This pediatrician said that first of all, he said that what we have here are concentration camps. He said that they're comparable to torture facilities, just leaving the lights on all night on these children. The UN defines that as torture. We used that as a way of breaking people when we were interrogating, what we thought were al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan and Iraq. But he goes on to say these harsh conditions have been intentionally inflicted on children as part of a broader plan to deter others from migrating, and therefore meets the definition of a mass atrocity, a deliberate, systemic attack on civilians. And like past atrocities, it's being committed by a complex organizational structure made up of people at all different levels of involvement. And this Teach First is the posted this over on DU, but it's basically, this is coming out of a piece by Kate Cronin-Furman in the New York Times on the 29th of last month. And add to that, First Lady Laura Bush, which is pretty amazing. I mean, she's married to a war criminal herself. Her husband lied us into the war in Iraq, which led to thousands of American deaths and hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million Iraqi deaths, over 5 million Iraqis displaced. The Iranians essentially taking over Iraq, which is going to make any war that Donald Trump wants to have with Iran very, very problematic. And, but basically, and then, Bush and Cheney having Jay Bybee and John Yoo write these papers. And apparently Brett Kavanaugh was right in the middle of this. These were among the papers that the 97% of his papers that the Republicans refused to allow to be released during his hearing before the Senate, which should have just shut down the hearing. But it didn't, because Mitch McConnell, he doesn't care about democracy. He stole a seat from Barack Obama in a way that will go down in history as one of the most shameful things that has ever happened in the United States Senate. Mitch McConnell, a man who obviously is spitting in the face of American democracy. But when the wife of a man who tortured and murdered people who, in many cases, the people who were picked up, many of them were sold. We were paying a bounty, right, for al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and so people were just turning in their neighbors who they didn't like. We were paying them $5,000, which is like 2 years worth of living expenses in Afghanistan. Her husband oversaw this and the torture that followed and all this kind of stuff. When she comes out and says this, and I'm going to read what she said, I think we all need to go, whoa, this is from BusinessInsider.com. She says the reason for these separations is she's talking about separating children from their parents at the border. She said, and she's talking about the Trump administration. She says the reason for these separations, this is Laura Bush, is a zero tolerance policy for their parents who are accused of illegally crossing our borders. I live in a border state. I appreciate the need to enforce and protect our international boundaries, but this zero tolerance policy is cruel. It is immoral. It breaks my heart. Our government should not be in the business of warehousing children in converted box stores or making plans to place them in tent cities in the desert outside of El Paso. She said, using these detention facilities to house thousands of children is, quote, eerily reminiscent, end quote, of the internment camps that held 120,000 Japanese during World War II and are, quote, again from Laura Bush, now considered to have been one of the most shameful episodes of U.S. history. So not only does Mitch McConnell go down in history as a man who intentionally sabotaged democracy in the United States and wounded our republic, but, you know, the wife of George W. Bush is saying that Donald Trump essentially will too. So the question, I guess, if the refugee crisis here and our response to it meets the definition, this climate refugee crisis meets the definition of a mass atrocity, what do we do about it? What does the UN do about it?